All right, welcome everyone to the 2021 edition of STEM Together, where we facilitate discussions involving industry professionals and students on everyday matters involving STEM. Now, today's topic is no stranger to us all. Its almost meteoric, earth-shattering impact was felt on our shores as early as January last year, with Singapore ending the year registering its worst economic recession in history. Now, the sustained aftershocks of this continue rattling our very foundations even today. But thankfully, the recession is showing signs of segueing into recovery. Now, before we reveal this topic and deep dive into discussion, let me first introduce myself and our invited guests today. Hi everyone, I'm Danny from Science Centre Singapore, and I'm pleased to be the facilitator of today's discussion with two wonderful guests. Firstly, our industry professional, Sandhya Rajaraman from Rockwell Automation. Sandhya, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
And we also have a student representative, Cho Jian Dong from Commonwealth Secondary.
Hi,
Jian Dong, how are you?
I'm fine.
That's good. All right. Do you mind if I call you JD for the rest of this discussion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if you have guessed it right, today's discussion revolves around COVID-19, which isn't news to most of us, but it is making the news still. Now, why? Well, simply because it has had a huge and a sustained impact when it hit our shores, affecting our jobs, our economy, productivity, industry, study, content delivery, community engagement, and the list goes on and on. Now, that's why this topic is still topical. Stories continue to emerge from the cracks. In fact, in February this year, a report on Singaporeans' reflections on COVID-19 was published by STEMTogether from contributions through the Emerging Stronger Conversations initiative. Now, there are still yet many more survival stories to uncover, I believe, and just so many dimensions to COVID-19 and its continued impact, with some profiteering and others plummeting. Now, today we plan to unpack how COVID-19 has affected our guests at work and also at study. So for our discussion, let's kickstart this with Sandhya, who is an embedded software engineer at Rockwell Automation. Sandhya, welcome to STEM Together.
Thanks.
Now, when the COVID-19 scenario kicked in, what happened? And how did it impact your work and industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think initially it was probably a similar reaction to many people where we kept thinking, oh, it'll be gone by March, it'll be gone by April. And, it kept shifting longer and longer. So it took a while to really accept it. I think one really interesting thing, so as you mentioned, I work at Rockwell Automation and we're in the manufacturing technology industry. I think COVID really highlighted some problems with supply chain and manufacturing. There were shortages of masks in different countries, shortages of ventilators and things like that. So I think this industry is actually going to be pretty impacted going forward. I think countries are definitely going to be looking at some local manufacturing investments and things like that, so that we're not always depending on the global supply of products. So I think it's actually, this industry has been pretty hit in this whole situation. So I think that's one interesting thing. And then I think also just on a more personal and team level, it was definitely hard for people at first to come up with new schedules and actually step away from the computer. And working at an international company like Rockwell, we also work a lot with our counterparts in Europe and in the US. So it was like morning Singapore, afternoon Europe, night US. So it was kind of like really overwhelming at first, but that eventually improved. And I think maybe we'll get to that as we go through more questions. But yeah, it was definitely a shock to both, our team and to the manufacturing industry as a whole. So.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Maybe if we could just pull this back a little closer to the actual work that you do. What exactly do you do at Rockwell Automation?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm an embedded software engineer. So our team specifically works on different safety products. So anything you can imagine, from like a roller coaster, a process where it needs to be very safe and controlled in a very safe manner. So what we do day to day is basically write code, mostly C++, and a lot of different, looking at a lot of different computer science topics and things like that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I imagine the productivity would have been affected, right?
I think actually the productivity surprisingly stayed the same, if not increased. And I've heard that from a lot of friends in different companies. I think the number of hours we spend in the office, a lot of that is also, having quick conversations here and there, or kind of being distracted by certain last minute requests. So actually at home, I personally felt, and I know my team felt this way, that we actually had fewer distractions, which is both good and bad. But yeah, I think in terms of productivity, it actually helped, but in a way where we were all working more. So.
Okay. Wow, that's wonderful. I guess perhaps in your role in doing the coding, I guess that can continue in a time of COVID-19, right?
Right. Yeah. So that helped a lot. And we do have some different equipment and hardware, some of the physical setups that we have in the office. So I think from the beginning, the office really focused on how we can always have somebody going to the office and making sure that they can help with the setups and things like that. So we were able to manage in that way. But initially, yeah, it helped that most of it is coding, so we could all still work remotely and still be productive.
Right. Well, thanks for sharing that. Let me flip this question over to JD. JD, tell us about school. Back when you first heard about COVID-19 school closure, where you had to study from home after that. How did that make you feel? Was there a difference from attending classes in person to suddenly attending classes virtually and things like that?
When I first heard the news that we are gonna study at home for HVL, I was actually quite happy because I could just ignore the teacher talking and teaching us and open another tab and watch YouTube.
Oh my goodness. Okay. That's definitely one reason to enjoy home-based learning, I suppose. But that would have impacted your learning, right?
Yes, it did impacted my learning, and halfway through HVL, I took some online tests for maths and English. I suffered a lot, and I got around a fail grade and a D grade. So I started listening to teacher talking.
Now, were you switching to YouTube because it was difficult to stay concentrated for long periods of time on the screen?
Some classes was quite easy to stay focused because the teacher showed us interesting videos, but some classes was boring. So I just opened a new tab and watch YouTube.
Okay, that's a very candid response. Thanks for your honesty there. All right. So what about the aspect of missing out on catching up with your schoolmates? Did that make a difference to your learning as well?
Yeah. Yes. The first few days I was just playing games with them, and because I play football and a lot of it, so after the first few days, I started missing them and started missing playing football with them.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. So you definitely miss the social aspect of meeting your classmates together for sports and also study, I suppose. Yeah. Sorry. Let's go back to Sandhya now. So Sandhya, you did mention, interestingly, one of the adverse effects, it actually positively impacted productivity, right? Now, for the actual challenges, maybe you could name or address, go back to some of the challenges that you had mentioned. As an individual, as a work group, as a company, how did you navigate those challenges posed by COVID-19? And maybe in the second breath, you could also share STEM applications played any part in transforming the way that you think and work?
Yeah, sure. So definitely from the early days, what helped the most is getting organized in terms of like who would be coming into the office which days, making sure that we have some ground rules for our meetings. Like we really tried to enforce keeping the video on so we could all still have some kind of personal communication and things like that. One thing that I want to mention is, in our company, we use the Agile Scrum development process. And for anybody who's not familiar, it's a lot of kind of like regular meetings to make sure things are staying on track. So I think this actually ended up really benefiting us because it forced us to stay in touch every day. We have a lot of update meetings and things like that. So it really forced us to keep talking every day and keeping the communication and personal connection there. So that was really helpful. I think another thing that we did to help with the challenges, and this is a bit more on the personal side too, but we tried to plan more like fun virtual activities and like games and things like that every few weeks so that we were still doing things that, before we took for granted, like being able to go out to lunch as a team and things like that. I think one more benefit that was it was unexpected was that, as I mentioned, we work a lot with teams in Europe and the US, and our headquarters is in the US. So before, we had a lot of scenarios where everybody in the US would be in one conference room, and then we would be on the phone kind of saying like, sorry, can you say that again? Like, it was that kind of situation. So now everybody is remote in a sense. So it has actually made the environment more inclusive in a way. No more of, being the only one who's not in the room, things like that. So I think in that sense, a lot of the technology aspect of it, like the video conferencing, everybody dialing in, and that has also improved a lot in the recent years. So in that sense, the STEM aspect of it really helped. And also the Scrum methodology, which is used in a lot of STEM careers, also helped a lot.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. What about you, Jian Dong? How did you manage this transition where you had to do home-based learning? Was the video conferencing tools helpful in helping you to learn? I mean, I know the teacher makes a big difference from what you shared earlier as well. But what about the video conferencing tool? You being able to see the teacher, hear the teacher, and use the multimedia resources that the teacher has prepared, did that actually enhance your learning and things like that?
No, not really, because when we started learning to use, we were at home and no one was there to teach us, so it took like a few minutes or maybe half an hour just to start a meeting, and every time we have to let or invite a new teacher in, it took another few minutes or half an hour, so it disrupted our learning.
Right. So these are the things, I think, some of the drawbacks, right? I think invariably when you're using video conferencing, you have to admit people in. So I guess that part, when people are new to that initially, it takes a little bit of time and there's a bit of a delay. But what about when things got going, aside from these delays in the delivery, in starting the delivery of the lesson, once the lesson got going, was it actually quite easy to follow online?
It was quite easy to follow because the teacher had to make things simple, as some students couldn't keep up with the studies, as learning online it's harder and you learn lesser than learning in front of the teacher face to face.
Right. Okay. So you're definitely someone who prefers the face to face interaction. All right. Thanks for sharing that, Jian Dong. Back to you, Sandhya. So would you say that the impact of COVID-19 is behind you at this point? It seems to have had presumably a positive impact in terms of your work culture and productivity, from what I hear from you. Is there still a sustained impact of that, positive or otherwise?
Yeah, I think there has been many positive impacts that I hope will continue. I mean, so so some things that are good are, the recognition of being more flexible with schedules and being able to actually participate in some of these remote meetings, like I mentioned, in a more inclusive way. I think there have been also some conversations now. A lot of companies are starting to recognize mental health as a priority, and like Rockwell has been offering things like a helpline for anybody who needs some advice or things like that. And I know some companies are offering like, days off. People are more open to allowing people to take MC due to mental health, just a wellness type of thing. So I think those are really important things we should have probably had all along, but COVID has now highlighted that. So I think that's really good. I think one thing though is that I've seen is people are getting a lot less, maybe the right word is people are getting more out of shape because we're all just kind of sitting all the time. And I think that's been one big issue. So our team has been trying to do things like steps challenges and because some days it'll be like the only walking is you go from your desk to the kitchen to get some tea and then you come back to the desk. So my Fitbit has kind of been my best friend through the time, so some of that is not so good. And I think we're going to see more of that. I don't think that's going to go away. But I am hoping that we will continue to be more aware of people's work-life balance and allow for the flexibility and the recognition that, people are now used to, having the home time and maybe more of a hybrid work situation going forward.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned, I think, about the awareness of the psychological dimension to this, given the increased screen time, the prolonged sitting and social isolation, the proximity to online devices, and the resultant expected high availability as a result of that they expect you to maybe answer emails past office hours. Although you didn't say that outright, I guess in some situations that's been the case. Just by virtue of when you wake up, you're at work, and when you go to bed, you're also kind of nearby your workstation as well. Yeah. So it's good to note that I think in Rockwell there's good policies in place where I think they are allowing you to take medical leave even for these sort of reasons. Emotionally you need that space.
Yeah.
To kind of just recover.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are some tips that you would have for people? I don't know, from a psychological perspective and physical perspective, since you mentioned people are getting out of shape also. You mentioned your Fitbit's your best friend.
Yeah.
What are some tips for adults who are continuing to face the situation where they still have to work from home for long periods of time, if not indefinitely at this point in time? How do they stay in shape, both emotionally and physically?
I think probably what has helped me the most is to set some strict hours when I will not be in front of the computer. So just, I do have some evening calls, but on days where I don't have that, I will shut my computer off by 6:30, and I won't look at it again the rest of the evening. So that's been, these are all things that I think actually we should have been doing even before COVID, but now it's becoming even more important. So I think having the routine to just make sense of time when you're kind of inside all the time is really important. And then for me, the biggest thing has been the physical activity and making sure I'm making effort to go outside and get some fresh air and go for walks. That has really helped me kind of stay calm, and even though there's so much uncertainty ahead of us and things like that.
Right. So what I hear from you is like basically setting and standing by some healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Limiting your screen time and also building in some exercise into your routine.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Maybe I'm going to swing over to JD. How are you coping with now having to learn from home as well as in the classroom? It's now a new situation for you, right?
So learning from a classroom has more benefits. You can ask the teacher after class when you don't know this question or that question. But during home-based learning, when you needed to ask a question, you have to ask for the teacher number and text her, and that's too inefficient.
Right. So at this point in time, have you gone back to school to do all of your classes in school, or are you doing some of the lessons at home sometimes?
We do most of the classes in school, but sometimes we have to do home-based learning, as if a second wave come by, we are going to be fully adapted to the thing we are using.
Right. So that in itself is like a new situation, isn't it? Where you're having a mix of both now. Are you able to cope well in this situation where it's now you've gone back to school, but you're also doing home-based learning from time to time?
We haven't done home-based learning yet, but we already had a date set into it. And for physical activities, they will assign us some assignment to do it at home. And jogging is a must for us. Maybe a few minutes, from 15 to 16 minutes.
Jogging, did you say?
Yes.
So who's going to keep track of that?
The school trusts us to be responsible and make sure we will have a healthy life.
Wow, okay. All right. So what's your hope for the future? Do you hope that things will go back to how they always used to be, where you are going to be learning always, and playing your football on site in school? Or do you think your hope might be a mix of both, like the current situation?
I actually have to thank the COVID-19 for something, because last year our primary school leaving examination, we had HBL, so they cut out some topics for math, and thank God for that, I passed math.
Right. Wow. Okay. So some changes in the curriculum, and then that helped you out as well in coping better as well with the subject. All right, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. And thank you also, Sandhya, for sharing a bit of your life in the COVID-19 recovery era, put it this way. I definitely learned much from both of your candid sharing, and I hope the rest of our viewers did too. Now, for viewers, if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed to our channel, please hit that notification bell to subscribe. And if you're watching the STEM Together series on Facebook, click follow. Now remember to like and share this video with all your friends, and stay tuned for our next conversation. This is Danny with my guests, Sandhya and JD, signing out. Bye-bye.
Bye.